Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new around here, I'm Vivian Asimos, your resident freelance academic and pop anthropologist, and here on Scholarly Pages I take an academic term or book or idea and I try to explain it in hopefully more easy to understand language. The idea being that I was confused so you don't have to be. So today we're talking about a term, and this is one of those big terms that you're going to hear a lot, and I think it's starting to also branch out into non-academic language as well. I've kind of seen it in a couple of things here and there, but often, at least in academia, it's often used without an explanation afterwards. So a lot of the times you'll see a term and the people will explain it anyway, even if it is a somewhat known term. But with habitus, people will just throw it out. So we are talking about habitus. Habitus is one of those words that people will just use without explaining. So if this is something that you have seen or you have experienced, hopefully I can try to help you out today. Basically, the core idea of habitus is that it is the way that people perceive and respond to their social worlds, focusing on personal habits, skills, and dispositions. This is particularly formulated by Pierre Bourdieu. However, it was a term prior to Pierre Bourdieu, but it's not going to be the person that you see associated with it. Bourdieu really brought it into a lot more popular usage, and kind of his way of understanding habitus became the way to understand habitus. So I'm going to be saying that it's a Pierre Bourdieu term. I know that historically it can be linked to other people, but it's basically a Pierre Bourdieu term, let's be honest. So essentially the idea is that our social worlds are structured in a very particular way, and we are therefore structuring our understanding of the world based on this understanding. However, we have a certain amount of agency to play within this intense structure. And a lot of the ways that we end up doing things, or the way that we understand stuff, tends to be because of our habitus. So I'm going to put up an exact quote from Pierre Bourdieu, and this is going to lead into a discussion of readability later. So remember how this was. But this is how Bourdieu described it. Now, Bourdieu's talked about habitus in quite a few books. I am particularly using his description in Logic of Practice. I'm choosing the description in Logic of Practice because this is the only Pierre Bourdieu book that I own. So it's the easiest one. I already have it tagged, so it's dog-eared rather than tagged. But I already have it tagged, so it was quite easy for me to find and grab to present to you guys. But like I said, Pierre Bourdieu has used this term in many instances, and you can find just differing descriptions and stuff depending on which book you choose, although they all basically mean the same thing. So, from the Logic of Practice, Pierre Bourdieu describes habitus as systems of durable, transposable, dispositioned, structured structures predisposed to function as structuring structures. That is, as principles which generate and organize practices and representations that can be objectively adapted to their outcomes without presupposing a conscious aiming at ends or an express mastery of the operations necessary to attain them. I know, he's French. Basically, this is saying what I said before. Our social worlds are structured in a very particular way. This is our systems of durable, transposable dispositions, structured structures. These are all the things. We have a structure around our society that then structures the way that we understand and relate to the world around us. However, we can adapt to it, we can represent it, we can relate to it. We are replicating this structure in differing ways. We are understanding the world according to these structures, and we are also playing within that and sometimes having to deal with that. All of this is habitus. And our habitus is influenced by social rules, norms, history, all of that kind of stuff. It's both influenced by and made up by these differing things. So, what is the purpose of the idea of habitus? So, the purpose is as a way of understanding that people act as inherently part of their social worlds. So sometimes when we meet people that are really different from us and we don't really understand why they're doing certain things or saying certain things, it's because they have a different habitus than us. It's because they are living within a different societal structure than us with different social norms. And so therefore our social norms and our way of acting isn't really conducive to their way of acting, and we find that really off-putting. That's an example. Social class, for example, can really limit or determine your opportunities in life, and it can affect you in a lot of different ways. So this is a way that our kind of socialized worlds and the way that we are placed within those social worlds can impact the way that we act, move, and what opportunities we are given in life. Agency plays an important role in habitus, although to a certain extent, right? So we have agency and we can do certain things, but we are limited by our social roles and by the opportunities that are given to us. So I think we have all seen how annoyed we can get as a society when you have some rich asshole telling you, well, we all have 24 hours in the day, I just do more with it. And it's like, well, you had a different social context that has given you different opportunities of what to do with that 24 hours. A single mom is not going to have the same opportunities within a 24-hour period. So it's agency, but it's contextualized agency. And that's very important. So let's get into some of the critiques and issues in regards to the idea of habitus. So even though habitus is used quite freely and quite frequently in anthropology, sociology, other social sciences, there are arguments against the idea of habitus, particularly as understood by Pierre Bourdieu. So one of these is in relation to that agency that we were talking about, that contextualized agency. For Bourdieu, the way that he described a lot of this agency, it feels a lot more automated. It feels more like you're not doing things because you actively want to do something. It's more like you're doing something because that's just what you do, and not necessarily because you want to do them. And so that's one of the critiques, is that there can be more agency that's less automated. Another one is actually another argument against Pierre Bourdieu is actually more in his method than in the actual argument itself. So Bourdieu did his observations in a very confined, specific space. And some people have tried to replicate his research and have not really been able to replicate it. This is a big thing that happens in anthropology and sociology, where people will become very famous and then other people will try to replicate that work. Being unable to replicate it can be both a problem and not, depending on what it is that you're discussing. So, for example, if I was studying let's say cosplay. I'm studying cosplay, but only within Salisbury, which is where I live, at the time period that I'm studying it, that I'm there. It means that if somebody else went and did a historical study of cosplay, they might find different stuff. Or if somebody went back to Salisbury in 10 to 20 years from now, they might find a very different situation. Doesn't mean that my work was wrong. It could be. It could be that they find that my work is wrong and that my work was wrong. Or it could be that people are different 20 years later. And cultures and societies have different understandings and stuff. Think about what was important and the way that we understood the world 20 years ago. It's gonna be quite a bit different. That is a very complicated aspect of doing contemporary research. However, it could also mean that some of the stuff isn't really good. Something that is supposed to be a very commonly discussed thing, something that is about all of society, should be replicated in all of society. It shouldn't be something that's only limited in scope. So for example, my hypothetical cosplay research in Salisbury would be saying this isn't applicable to everywhere, this is applicable to Salisbury. While, if I'm trying to make a broad statement about all cosplayers everywhere throughout all of time, then that should be replicated. So it depends on what it is that you're doing, and Bourdieu definitely was making some big sweeping comments. So essentially, sometimes practice-based methods, so actually doing things, doesn't really hold up in a lot of what Bourdieu says. However, it's a great theory, and it's a great theory to work with. So let's talk about readability real quick. I normally don't reserve this for terms because terms can be kind of used by a lot of different people. Habitus, for example, is used by all sorts of different people. However, reading the original work is incredibly useful. And if you couldn't tell by the short little, not even a full paragraph that I put up on the screen to describe Habitus, Bourdieu is absolutely horrendous to read. Absolutely horrendous. I do not suggest it. In fact, I don't suggest it unless you physically have to read him. And in that case, I would prepare yourself first, which I will mention because we're leading into where to go if you want to read more. This is where I would say going and finding other books about Pierre Bourdieu's work is going to be really your key. Finding other people that are explaining him in a lot more easy to understand language, where they have cited the things for you, maybe they've quoted the stuff and then explained it afterwards, is going to mean that then when you read him, you've got that in the back of your head. One of the ways that I read Bourdieu for the first time was I had Bourdieu on one side and I had one of those kinds of books on the other that actually had logic of practice in it, and I was able to really go through. So whenever I found something in Bourdieu that I could tell was really important and relevant, I would be able to look and see if it was mentioned in there, or at least something about it was mentioned, and it made it that tiny bit easier to get through. So, I am recommending Michael Grenfell has done a book called Pierre Bourdieu Key Concepts, which Habitus is definitely in. So you can go and check that out. It is an edited volume, so its readability can differ, but even the hardest in readability in that edited volume is going to be 10 times easier than Bourdieu. So, I definitely suggest going through and reading something like that. And one of the benefits of a book like that is not only does it have a section on Habitus, but it also has a section on Pierre Bourdieu himself and his methods and his theories and his biography. And a lot of that stuff can really help to understand what it is that the theory is really mentioning and talking about. And of course, if you do want to read Bourdieu, there is Logic of Practice. It's the one that I have. I have found it semi-useful, but not any more useful than just reading other people talking about Bourdieu, and the readability is immensely low. So I would more suggest something like Pierre Bourdieu Key Concepts, and then moving into Bourdieu if you are interested. And that's it for today. If you liked this, do all of the YouTube stuff, so you can follow me on social media. I'm at Viviana Simos on most platforms, but I am most active on Instagram. I do post little short time lapses of me working every so often on TikTok, if that's something that you are interested in. And maybe I'll do other stuff with TikTok, but I just don't know if I will. It's more work. And you can go check out my blog, which is incidentalmythology.com, which is all about pop culture and mythology. And you can check out my other YouTube channel, Incidental Mythology, where I do video essays on pop culture, focusing on storytelling and myth. So if any of that stuff interests you, go check out that stuff. And in the meantime, happy reading, be good to one another, and I'll see you next time. Bye!